Okay, here we're doing a leak down test on a couple of 275 Mercury Verado engines for a potential buyer that's out of town. He asked us to check this boat out. This is a beautiful boat. It's an offshore Donzi. It's 35 foot. Looks like it's in impeccable condition, but he asked us to do a leak down and a compression test just to confirm that the engines were in good shape. This is Joseph, and that's Kenneth up there. It's a little cold here today, and we've already leak tested the one engine in front of Kenneth there, and that engine tested out really, really well. We haven't done compression tests yet, but we've done the leak down test first because that'll identify problems quicker than a compression test will, and more, more definite problems. So what we've done here is we've got our snap-on leak down tester, which is a pretty simple item. It's got a pressure regulator and a gauge. And what you do is you hook your air hose, your incoming air, to input, and then you use this regulator right here to get it as close to zero as you can. And it's not a perfect world, so that's close enough. And that's without the engine hooked up, without hooking it yet to the cylinder hose. So you zero your incoming air pressure as close to zero, and then Joseph has screwed this hose in. This is a regular compression gauge hose, but it's missing this Schrader valve inside so the air pressure can come out of it and go into it. We're starting on the number one cylinder just because that's the way we do it. Joseph has already got it on compression stroke. I think I put it there a while ago. And Mr. Walker is going to take 2 pairs of vice grips, and he's going to kind of lock the engine down. Now there's just a little metal tab. We're not putting a lot of pressure. There's a little metal tab up there for holding the flywheel cover, and he's just putting a pair of vice grips on a good part of the flywheel to where he's not going to damage anything, so that when we put air pressure in the cylinder, it doesn't push the piston down and open the valves and cause our leak down test to be inaccurate. Joseph is zeroing the gauge one more time to check it. He's going to plug that in. That's going to send air pressure through the regulator, and as we do that, the leak down gauge comes up and it shows us our percent of leakage. It looks like there we've got about 12 pounds of leakage, maybe 13. Of course, our gauge probably fluctuated just a little bit initially, so let's just call that 10 to 12% on number one. Let's do number two. So he's going to disconnect that releases pressure. Mr. Walker is going to release the vice grips so we can turn the motor again. And you can just clamp those vice grips anywhere that's safe, to where you're not going to break anything. Because the motor is going to buck just a little when you stick some air into those cylinders. And he's going to get it on the compression stroke. And he's just feeling and listening for the compression. And I guess he's happy with that. I didn't hear it, but he's happy with it. Did you zero your gauge already? So it's easy to get, got him moving kind of fast, so I want to slow him down a little bit. So he's going to zero that gauge. And that's pretty close, right? That's pretty damn close. Mr. Walker's clamping the vice grips on. So we're going to wait till he gets those on there to where the engine doesn't roll. Now they're in place. And he's going to hook the air pressure up so the engine doesn't turn. We're going to let the gauge come up to as high as it can go. Now if you get kind of a bad reading like this right here, hold still please. If you get kind of a bad reading, that's a lot of leakage. And I hear some air leaking. So it's my guess that we don't have the engine on the compression stroke exactly. So we're going to go ahead. If you do that, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. Disconnect that. Take those vice grips back off. Now I'm going to do the push button. Joseph is a little bit new at doing this test. So don't put your thumb completely over the hole, just a little bit so we can hear it, okay? Right there. That's it. Did you hear that? Okay, that's all we need to do. So you don't have to baby it and just barely bump it. Just go ahead and roll it until you get it. And if you miss it, just go back around. And Walker's going to reclamp the vice grips. Now we're double checking this. It's possible there's some leakage in that cylinder, but we're gonna find out here in just a second. Let's make sure the gauge is zeroed again. That's close enough, Joseph. That's good. It can be off just a little bit. It's not going to hurt it. We're going to hook that back up. Now we're watching the gauge come up. And you see we increased just a little bit. So this cylinder, number 2 cylinder on the port engine, hold on please, has a little bit more leakage than any other cylinders we've tried. Okay, we also hear a little bit of air coming out somewhere. Where do we hear this air coming out? So I want to listen to where the air is coming out. I'm listening down by the prop. I hear just a little bit. And that sounds like it's inside the crankcase. So that would be the piston rings leaking just a bit. Now I do want to add that we have not warmed these engines up. So this is an ice cold test. Most people, and most of the time, you really want the engine warm. But if you got an engine, you know, that maybe you already know has some problems, you don't necessarily need to warm it up. So at this type of percentage, we would want to warm this motor up. We'd like to recheck this cylinder after it's warmed up to see if it's sealing. My guess is it's probably fine, but that is a little excessive for that one. Okay, let's disconnect it and go to the next one. We're going to take the vice grips off. I think that was about 23, yeah. And Mr. Walker is writing down our test results over here for the customer. And we labeled them port and starboard. Obviously, this is the port engine. Joseph has screwed the hose in. We got to take the vice grips off now. This boat's kind of tall, so we've got a stand here to stand up on. I'm going to disconnect those. And now Joseph's going to give me the starter button because I'm like the king of it. There it is. Okay, that's a compression stroke. And you could be just a, you know, if you're on compression, then you know both the valves are closed. You know, both the intake cycle and the exhaust cycle valves are closed. And that way you're getting the best test you can get. Okay, he's going to zero the gauge again. Now he's going to plug it on. This time we're going to watch this when he plugs it on. This is normal. It takes a little bit for it to air up the cylinder, like airing up a tire. Okay, and we're seeing about 30 pounds. Now that was the first reading we saw on the cylinder just above it also. So we're gonna go ahead and disconnect this hose one more time right there. These are high hours engines. I was told these engines have 1,400 hours on them. That's what I was told. Okay, right there. All right, and if they're running good with that kind of percent of leak, I mean, you know, it's go ahead and plug it back in. Let's try it. Make sure your hose is tight in the cylinder. It's tight. And I hear a little air leaking. So we can say that, so we went from what? From 30 to 20. From 30 to 20 just by rechecking it, right? So you have to be careful. Don't just go by that first reading. Do it a couple times and put some common sense into it too. That, you know, if there's a little oil in there, if the engines are warmed up, once it gets a little oil on the cylinder walls, I mean, they may seal up a lot better. So really, if the engine is running fine, I would not go into some panic with this kind of number, okay? All right, let's check the next cylinder. And of course, if you're using oil or, you know, whatever, and since these computers are, so these engines are computerized. I mean, you can plug a scanner in, you can take a look at any history and see if there's an overheat history or whatever. But, you know, at 1,400 hours, hold on, let's do that again. Put your thumb just barely over it. Right there. You heard that? That's it. And Walker's going to clamp again. It's a little monotonous, but it goes pretty easy. Okay, those are clamped on. Joseph's going to zero the gauge. That's close enough. Plug it in. Now we're going to see, and that one shut down quickly, right? So that went down to like 10% real fast. So we know that on this one, number 2 and number 3 have a little higher leakage than 1 and 4 so far. Okay, let's go to the next one. I've seen brand new engines, even racing engines that the rings haven't sealed up on, have 30 and 37% leakage, and when they started up, they ran perfectly fine. Okay, are you comfortable with that? We'll let you do it this time. Go ahead and clamp the flywheel so it won't turn. It's kind of dark out here today. I know my lighting sucks on this video, but Joseph's going to zero the gauge again. I'm going to get a different view this time. Okay, and go ahead and plug it in. This is number 5 cylinder of the 275 Verado. And it looks good, 10%, right? Very good. Okay, let's go check number 6. Just be sure you don't release those vice grips too soon while you got air pressure in that cylinder, because that motor will roll over. I mean, you're using, all an engine is an air compressor, and when you're shooting air into the cylinder, you're forcing the piston down. So, I mean, if you had your fingers in a way or that tool bucked on you, I mean, you could get hurt. So you want to be careful. You're dealing with, you know, some pretty strong stuff. That sounded good. That's what I want to hear. Just like that. And now he's going to zero his gauge again. All right, good enough. plug it in when Walker's got it set up. Let us know when you're ready up there. Okay. Plug that in. It's close. That's good. Yeah, I mean, as long as you're close. That gauge fluctuates a lot, but it's only about a 2-pound fluctuation. So go ahead. And there we go. We're about 10, 12%, right? About 12%. 12%. And that's number 6. So that's how you do a leak down test. And again, that's a cold engine. A lot of guys may give you some flack for this because the engine is cold, because you're really supposed to warm the engine up. But in my opinion, it's just not that damn critical, quite honestly. So I think it passes. I think we've identified the cylinders that would potentially have some, a little lower compression, probably not. Maybe a slight oil consumption on this motor compared to the other one. You know, it'd be so slight you might not even notice it. So that's it for a leak down test. We're going to go ahead and run a compression test now, guys, and we're going to see that the compression is okay. And if the compression looks good, the leak down test, I say, passes. I don't know what the gentleman is paying for this boat. You know, he may be getting a heck of a value on it. I mean, it's really in clean condition, and it's a very nice boat. It's got a beautiful McLean trailer, aluminum trailer underneath it. This is a step ventilated hull boat. You know, right there is the steps. I mean, these things are really nice boats. Very expensive boat, new out of the box. Really pricey rig. And I like the Verados. You guys like the Verados? I like the Verados. You know, supercharger on them, got a blower on each one. That's my kind of stuff, man. Hot rod.